All right, everyone, thank you so much. Coming up next, I want to jump right in and introduce you to our next keynote presenter, Kenneth Bailey, the Director of the Office of Inclusion and Civil Rights with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA. Kenneth, known as Kenny, joined NOAA as the Director of the Civil Rights Office in November 2016. He's a retired enlisted Army combat veteran with more than 23 years of military experience. So Kenny, thank you so much for your service. Can't really say enough about that. Very impressive, obviously. A few more things. Kenny's federal civil service career began with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, after which he transitioned to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. He has received numerous military awards to include combat campaign medals, in addition to numerous federal performance, diversity and inclusion, and community service awards. There's a lot more I could say too, Kenny, but I just want to make sure everyone gets to know you just a little bit before you take to the stage. So with that, I'll let you get started. Oh, I can't quite hear you yet, Kenny. I can see you though.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, and the slide presentation, can you see that? Nope, not yet.
I can see it perfectly well, Kenny. It's right on full screen.
Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, we're ready to rock. Can you hear me again still? Can you see the slide?
I can hear you, Kenny, but I can no longer see the slides. If you could pop those back up.
Sorry.
Oh, perfect. They're back on. Thank you.
All right, I gotta make sure. Sorry, I don't have. I can't see the chat.
Kenny, if you hit Control H, it should be able to pull up the chat for you. And then you should be able to see that and your full screen presentation to advance for the audience.
Control H. No, that took me out. Sorry for the delay. Give me 1 second. Let me walk back through it again. Give me 1 second. Let me walk back through the steps, starting over again.
If you'd like to just go with the presentation, Kenny, I can give you audio cues on your timing at the end. So you won't need the chat.
Okay. Okay, so you'll just let me know if something comes up, right?
Of course.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Thanks for that introduction. That was much more than was needed. I'd also like to thank the entire Opal team for the invitation to speak here today at the 2021 Opal Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit, Virtual Summit. I'm extremely honored. Most particularly, I'd like to thank Ms. Ashley Hagelin and of course yourself, Shirlene, for the invitation as well. I'd like to thank you all for being here and choosing to take part in my session. You know, speaking at a summit or a conference is really one of the most impactful engagements I can have as a diversity practitioner. You know why? Because most of you are here of your own free will and not It's not the mandatory diversity training that your organization pulled you away from your daily duties, told you to attend, or makes you attend online. Your boss didn't make you come to this session. They may have required you to attend the summit, but it's not likely that they told you you had to be at this specific session. So the majority of you, if not all of you, are here with the willingness to learn and grow. And my session is going to provide you with the opportunity to do both, learn and grow. You see, life is a continuous learning cycle, but growth is not automatic. So I'm going to provide you with the information to learn, and then the growth, which is the application of learning, that's all going to be on you. Okay. We'll get started. Discussion points. Organizational.
Kenny, sorry to interrupt. Could you share your screen so we can see your presentation?
Lord. Control tab. I didn't know y'all had lost the presentation.
That's all right. Your talking points were great, Kenny.
You good?
Yes, it's back on. Thank you.
Okay. Discussion points. Organizational culture, DEI, and practical ways to succeed at leading at DEI, and linking culture and DEI to business outcomes and success. A great place to work, world's best workplaces. Partnership for Public Service, best place to work in the federal government. Forbes, world's best employers. And then lastly, LinkedIn top companies. And of course, that's not all of the list. But what I want you to do is look at the bottom of that arrow, and I want you to think about what it takes to get from the bottom of that arrow to the top. In other words, what does it take to get from the bottom of the list to the top of the list? If you and your organization haven't thought about that, ask yourself why. Because the companies that's on this list, they can attract the best talent in the world. People want to work with a place that's identified as the best. And generally, if your company is on this list, that means they care about their employees, because the feedback to determine the ranking of these lists come from the employees. If you ever worked or been in a workplace that was at the top of the list, you know how that feels. It's in the air. You walk in there and you're like, whoa, I like this. This is really nice. It's like walking into a fine dining restaurant and being greeted by the maitre d' and escorted to your table, where they help you get seated, and then they place the napkin on your lap, and they hand you a menu, and they tell you 10 different specials that's not on the menu without using a paper list. And then they pour your water, and they ask you, do you need anything else, before they walk away. And you look around and you're like, whoa, this is really nice. I like it here. Well, guess what? The one thing all of those organizations at the top of that list have in common, they all have good organizational culture. Organizational culture. What is it? Although culture is a familiar term throughout the federal government, private industry, as well as professional organizations, can we assume that everyone knows what it means and what it looks like? And the answer is no. One important thing to understand about culture is that it's not policy. You can't just regulate culture. Let's look at management and leadership. Let's look at management and leadership like we might look at policy and culture. Management and leadership deals with planning, organizing, coordinating, and directing staff. And leadership deals with motivating, inspiring, and most particularly influencing. See, unlike the concrete actions of management, leadership deals with the cognitive influence that drives employees' performance outcomes. When we look at policy and culture, you can't enforce policy based on this. You can enforce policy based on a stated directive. That really gives you far more control over compliance. Whereas organizational culture is something very, very different. It's more about the effect of the behavior on the environment. So what is organizational culture? Attitudes, customs, traditions, beliefs, values, and norms, formal and informal, that determine the social and psychological environment of an organization. Organizational culture major influences. Leaders. Leaders set the tone for organizational cultures by walking the talk. And the talk begins with organizational core values. Organizational core values are the next big influence on organizational culture. But sometimes organizations establish values, but they don't always live by them. For example, we say we care about our employees or our team members, but we don't always demonstrate it. When our employees share that they've been having problems at home and they tell us, they tell us that they're having problems at home, we tell them they need to separate home from work and leave home at the door when they come in, instead of finding ways to work to help mitigate the challenges that they're having at home. Our organizations sometimes say they're socially conscious. However, they had never took a position on any social issue. And organizations say they're a company built on technology, but the computers that everyone's using are old and outdated. A case frequently used to demonstrate value incongruency is the BP Deepwater Horizon oil disaster, where millions of gallons of water was spilled into the ocean, destroying fish, water, and coastal areas. Safety was one of their core values, yet they didn't walk the talk. They made a bunch of little mistakes that led to a large catastrophe, also taking 11 lives. So when values are established, in order to build an environment with good organizational culture, you must live by those values. To avoid incidents like this and other incidents, leaders must explicitly say what the organizational values are. And they must also demonstrate and model behavior that's aligned with the stated values. Some characteristics of a positive organizational culture. Highly functional. They get things done. Employee empowerment. Employees are empowered to do their work and not micromanage. High employee engagement. There are high employee engagement at all levels of the organization. Calculated risk. Employees are not afraid to take risks because calculated risk is encouraged. Stability. Because employees are not afraid to take risks, they don't have to fear being terminated or reprimanded. Leaders model and exemplify effective conflict resolution is a last part or one more of the positive organizational culture signs. Benefits of positive organizational culture. Creativity, high innovation. Creativity is running rapid, right? Low attrition. Do you know how much it costs for rehiring, training, and the loss of all of that experience that you had? Once again, there's higher employee engagement. There's strong commitment to the organization. It enhances the organization's branding capabilities for branding and marketing, recruitment. And then there's strong organizational cohesion throughout the various parts of the organization. Employees are connected with each other. And then lastly, there's high job satisfaction and organizational loyalty. The diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, the presence of differences such as race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, or political perspective. And equity is promoting the justice and impartial and fairness within the process and procedures and with equitable distribution and resources throughout the institution and those systems. And inclusion is the outcome that ensures that all those who are diverse can actually feel can actually be their authentic self. They feel like they're welcome, that they belong, and that they have the ability to reach their full potential. Have you ever seen the diversity dimension chart? So a lot of them call it a diversity wheel, where you have your primary identity, you have the primary identity, such as those things inherent in you, like race, ability, sexual orientation, again, so forth and so forth. And then you also have your secondary identities, such as religion, parental status, language, marital status, geographical region, and your organizational dimensions, like union status, union affiliation, management or non-management status, what department that you work in, whether, and your cultural identity, like time, your views on personal space, and many, many others. All of those categories are in a single person. And a person could have more than 20, it does have more than 20 different diversity dimensions, which make up who they are. You're looking at one big Rubik's Cube, where the leader has to understand how to put it together and make it work equitably and inclusively. Wow, that is a lot to ask of one person, while they still have to keep their eye on getting the job done. Most of the time, we're asking a technical person to do it with minimal or no leadership experience or training. So to get that done and get it done right, okay? Okay, well, don't be discouraged, not to be discouraging, but let me go on with some other challenges in effectively leading and managing the diverse people in our organization. Some have little to no engagement with people that don't look like them. And some don't have the desire to. But some do, right? And there's hope, because where there's hope, there's promise, right? So to become a better leader in the space of diversity and inclusion, and a better leader in general, to take off again some of what Randy talked about in the previous session, become self-aware, right? It starts with yourself. Take an introspective look at who you are, how you were socialized by your family, by your religious beliefs, by the news and social media, and challenge those stereotypes, challenge stereotypes, values, and beliefs where there's evidence that keep appearing that dispels those beliefs. Understand whether you judge or you impose your beliefs on others, and find ways to maintain those values and beliefs that are true to you without feeling like everyone else has to have the same values.
Kenny, 15 minutes.
Thank you. Be emotionally intelligent. You need to be a good leader and to connect and empathize with your team members. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware and be aware and control and expression of one's emotions, and be able to handle interpersonal relationships. If you are not emotionally intelligent, you can't possibly empathize with your team members. They go hand in hand. Empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotion. Increase your social intelligence. If you've never or you've rarely been out of your own environment and never engaged with others that don't look like you in a social setting, do it. Meet other people. Learn things about them without always relying on what you heard in the media, what your family or what your friends say. Meet them. Learn for yourself. I assure you, it'll be a remarkable experience. You'll see the limits of your environment and your social engagement that hold you back from an entirety of a really beautiful world with beautiful people in all types. Sharpen your communication skills. You cannot communicate with everyone and get the same results. Learn the communication style that makes you most effective to motivate persons as an individual who you deal with. Become socially aware so that you can be socially conscious about the things that impact society that can also possibly impact your workplace. If you're not socially aware, then you won't be able to develop intervention strategies that can lessen the potential impact within your work environment. Learn how to be a problem solver, resolve conflict. You're going to be dealing with some highly complex problems, some highly charged interpersonal and professional conflicting issues. Problem solving and issues of conflict are innately diverse issues. There are different ways of solving problems, and conflict arises in different ways for various different reasons. DEI, and if you do not intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. I know many of you have heard this over and over again. So that means that you have to be intent about having inclusive behaviors. So demonstrate inclusive behaviors. And I have examples of some. Be active, be an active be an active bystander, an ally. When you're in power or you're in the majority, speak up when you see someone else wrong. Listen attentively. Listen for understanding. Do not focus on what people are wearing, their speech, how they look, but listen so that you can understand and interpret what they're trying to say and get across. Value each person's contribution, large and small. It's all important and it's all connected. Examine your assumptions. Often we make assumptions based on who we are, what we value, and we judge people by those assumptions and values and beliefs. Challenge the status quo. People within organizations are quick to say, we don't do that here, or we do it like this in our company. So challenge the status quo. Don't continue to do the same thing over and over and over again the same way. There are better ways and different ways to do things, and many times you can yield a better outcome. Invite team members into the conversation. Do not have team members in your meetings and don't offer them the opportunity to contribute to the discussion. You want to know that you value everyone that's in there and allow them the opportunity to contribute. Acknowledge your biases. We all have them. And in most cases, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't like the color blue, but sometimes there is something wrong with that. And that's when biases are tied to people. And when we make our employment decisions based off of those biases. Challenge stereotypes. You know, you've seen, you've heard many of them. Don't believe everything that you see or hear. Ask about them and understand, and don't apply the same thing to people that all genders or race or ethnicity. Don't generalize that behavior is tied to everyone in that same race, again, race, ethnicity, or gender. Gain some cultural intelligence about other people who don't look like you. Ask your coworkers about the things that they value and why it's important for them, and then that will help you gain an understanding. That don't mean that you have to have the same appreciation for those things that they do, but it does give you an understanding of why they appreciate and value those things. Allow for differences. Differences equals diversity. Think outside the box. Allow your team to be creative. And de-bias your organizational communication. Make sure that your web communication and that your institutional policy do not contain exclusive language. Business success. The link to culture and DE&I in business success, you just have to go back to slide 7, the benefits of a positive organizational culture. And when you establish a good posture for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a good organizational culture, your organization will not only head to the top of their best place to work list, you will ultimately increase your business success. Action steps for you from this session that we had. Develop a people-first strategy. Organizations at the top of those lists, they know that it takes people to drive the mission. And knowing that it takes people to drive the mission, they take care of their people. And when you take care of your people, they take care of you. It's like owning a car. If you take care of your car, it'll take care of you. But if you don't, get it serviced every 3 months, change the brake pads and all of those things, then it's going to break down and it won't take care of you the way it should. Embed DE&I into your organizational business practices. Your business strategy. If you don't embed DE&I into business strategy, then it won't become important to the business and line and operational leaders. So it has to be connected to the mission that they're doing at the operational and business functions. Demonstrate inclusive behaviors. I just talked about that and gave you some. And of course, that list was not all inclusive, but you should in your organization have a running list of inclusive behaviors that your not only your leaders, but your employees can adopt as well. And develop accountability metrics. Accountability metrics for your leadership is very, very important so that they have performance elements which ties them to organizational culture and diversity and equity and inclusion. And again, that'll help drive the business success. This organizational culture begins with core values and leaders who exemplify those values and who value diversity, equity, and inclusion, who set the expectations for team members to work within the set of values in their organization has chosen as a part of their identity. When the organizational culture is positive, you can feel it intuitively. It's like positive energy, which has a distinct aurora, like walking into that fancy restaurant I talked about earlier. You know it's special. It makes you feel special just being there and being a part of that environment. That's how your workplace feels when it has a good culture, which is built on solid leadership and strong organizational values. Those are the organizations at the top of that arrow, at the top of those lists from those companies. Happy to take your questions at this time.
I will pop back in, Kenny. Or I think I will. There I am. Thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes left until our next keynote, so I do have a couple of questions. And I also, I appreciate the real world references in what you're explaining, because I think it helps put together a picture of this is what we're trying to achieve and this is how we can relate it to what's going on and things that we can do to make ourselves feel better about certain things and realize what's happening and move forward, right? So I think, one good question for you is, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing a DE&I program?
That ties back to one of the points that I just made, that it has to be connected to the business strategy, right? The people that's operating out in the field doing the things that they do, they're concentrated and focused on those things, right? That's what's important to them. And they're not always, they don't always understand the importance of the human dynamic. So when you help them understand the dynamics that's tied to driving humans to help them be more productive, they understand that it will help, again, increase their business success.
Do you see, this is a question that popped into my head, Kenny, but are you seeing a shift when you talk about tying it back to business success, where these discussions are not new, but is there more momentum in terms of companies actually taking action and putting together steps to make sure that it is all tied together? Do you see that, hear that, your insights?
Yeah, I think so. I think in addition, the events of this year helped to propel that even more. Last year in the national social unrest really helped to propel that even more. So I know of my agency and I know of other organizations, both in the private sector and the federal sector, who have taken that momentum and used that to drive, again, their tie their strategy, their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy into their actual operational strategy.
And that leads to the next question. How have you embedded DE&I concepts into your organization?
Well, some of the ways is by making sure managers are held accountable, right? And that's by providing them information and providing them data, right? That makes them accountable for what they see about how the organization looks like, and then they have to own it, right? Because once they heard the information, then they're accountable for owning it and taking steps to make a difference or maintaining the status quo, which will cause them attrition.
I mean, and that leads to the next question, leadership practices, and that is, what actions have you taken to ensure that your management team, in fact, being inclusive in their leadership practices?
Again, holding them accountable and having regular meetings with them to discuss how they are implementing those strategies. And another way is by developing the organization's diversity and inclusion strategy, right? That ties that ties the responsibility to the managers to make sure that they are taking steps in regards to diversity and inclusion.
But great notes, Kenny. But I think all of this still also ties into organizational culture. What is the current state of organizational culture? What is that top-down approach right now? So a question I have, which is more so looking and peering into the future, how do you see the future of what work will look like affecting organizational culture now or in the near future?
Well, the future of work is now, right? I mean, we're determined. We are still determining that, but we now have the opportunity to gather data, which helps us understand what the future of work is going to look like, right? And there are many people who feel like they've had the opportunity, right, to work in this virtual environment. They'll want to continue to work in this virtual environment. And as we know, we have some organizations that are resistant to that opportunity, even though the job affords the ability to do that. So that will impact the organizational culture. It will also, once again, it will give people ideas about, well, this is not a place I want to work because I know this place offers a remote opportunity, which allows me a better work-life balance. So that's one of the most significant ways that I see it impacting organizational culture in the future.
Let me double check, Kenny, just to see if we've had any more questions from the audience. I don't see any. I think that we've kind of addressed all of them. Selfishly, I have another one for myself, and that's based, Kenny, off of your very impressive resume, in serving in our military, and thank you again, for that. How has that experience helped you in your role today, and especially when DE&I leaders are looking at the last 12 months and saying, this is really a crisis, so how you may have been in crisis situations with your military experience. So how does that transition and help you with what we're dealing with today?
Well, I'm in the federal government and working in this, field because of my experience within the military, right? And being a practitioner within the military as well. And there are a lot of different things, operating in a combat environment, operating in different locations that tie and help me to relate to different organizational cultural aspects at different levels of organizations and throughout different regions. And, we have, federal agencies. I've been at several federal agencies that have, offices throughout the world and in the country, of course. So with them, there's overarching organizational culture, again, based off of, much of the core values, but then there are subsets of organizational cultures throughout. So my experience in the military and having such a diverse engagement throughout my military career with all of these different cultures, all of these different locations, allow me to engage and have a better understanding, or I'm not going to say a better understanding, but have a good understanding of different regional aspects to tie to ultimately the overall organizational culture.
Thank you, Kenny. I mean, again, lots and lots of notes. I really appreciate you answering that last question. I have ties to the military myself, so I'm always curious about how that transitions, into today's world, and especially everything that's going on. So I wish you the best, Kenny, and I thank you so much for joining us. I've got to keep everyone on time and get to our next co-presentation. So I'll wave goodbye, and thank you again, Kenny.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.